Hi everybody, it's Sid from Cool Movie Grab, your source for everything about cool movies. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos, and give them a like and comment and tell me what you think of my content. Sorry about the delay. I haven't really posted anything recently for the last couple of weeks. It's just been really busy with working late shifts and doing overtime, and also had like other commitments to attend to, like weddings and whatnot. So I thought, this time I'm going to record a video before I start work today. So without further ado, this is my top 50 action movies, films 25 to 21. So it's like we're on the second half of the videos. So we'll be kind of like getting into much. For me, in my opinion, I would say these are much better action movies than what I've done before. So they keep better and better with each video. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, at number 25 we have Exiled, 2006 Hong Kong movie directed by Johnny To, starring Anthony Wong, Francis Ng, Nick Chung, Roy Chung, Lam Sut and Simon Yam, as well as Josie Ho in a small supporting role. The film stars Nick Chung as a former assassin, former Hong Kong triad hitman who Macau-based hitman who decides to kind of like come out of exile and moves back with his wife and kid, trying to live a peaceful life. But the thing is, he had gone into exile because he had failed on killing a gang triad boss, and that triad boss is still bitter about it and decides to send two hitmen, played by Anthony Wong and Lam Sut, to kill him. Whereas at the same time, two other hitmen, played by Francis Ng and Roy Chung, decide to stop the two trying to kill him, because they're all best friends. They've known each other since they were kids, and they feel that they should kind of let this one go. But as things kind of like progress further, you see that the characters have a really deep relationship, and they're kind of like a strong brotherhood, and at the same time there's a lot of kind of stuff going on behind the scenes in terms of like the triad underworld, considering that this film was also set in 1997 when the handover for Macau had also kind of like gone from Portuguese colonial rule to back to mainland China rule. And in the midst of this, it's just this film is filled to the brim again. We had some great action sequences. The shootouts, you have this kind of the swiftness of like ballistic John Woo action, but at the same time with the amount of gun smoke and the use of like cinematography and even like, for example, tones and filters, it has a very kind of Leone-esque feel to this film. But at the same time, at the core, it still has that strong kind of Hong Kong cinema feel to it. And I mean, this is one of the greatnesses of Johnny To. I mean, he's such a great author when it comes to like Hong Kong action movies. Although he directs more than just action movies, he's done drama, he's done thrillers, he's done action, not just action movies, but also kind of movies about like, he's even done romantic comedies, believe it or not. So, and he's actually quite like a very popular filmmaker. And it's nice to see that he had like such great kind of output coming out, especially during I would say throughout the 2000s. That's where his best output for me. That's when the best of Johnny To had come from, the late 90s up until the early 2010s. His movies were great. I mean, this itself was kind of a it's part of an unofficial trilogy called the Gunman trilogy. The first one being The Mission in 1999, where you had pretty much the same principal cast except for like Nick Chung. It kind of is about like a band of like hitmen who are hired as bodyguards and to protect their gang boss. But at the same time, you see their relationships, kind of like the bond that they build throughout this kind of journey. And it kind of questions their kind of loyalty to themselves and to the triads. And then the third one, this is the second one, Exiled, and the third one was a film called Vengeance, which featured most of the cast of Exiled, and also it featured Johnny Halliday as the protagonist, as a chef who's out for vengeance, comes to Hong Kong to get revenge on the people who killed his daughter and her family. And yeah, so but then this is kind of like, this was a great trilogy, but for me, I would say Exiled is definitely the strongest out of the three. I mean, the shootouts again are absolutely amazing. It's full-blooded action, because a lot of the films that we see, especially in like post 2005 or so, a lot of the blood, it's like, when you shoot, you can see CGI blood that's just kind of being splattered, and it just doesn't look good at all. Whereas this time around, you had that kind of blood squib effect, where it's like you can see the blood squib is very powdery and kind of just sprays everywhere when people are getting shot. And it's just, again, the cinematography of this film is like some of the best I've seen. I mean, it kind of like brings to mind a lot of French cinema, and again, Sergio Leone films, and even the use of music. It kind of has that very kind of Ennio Morricone type of feel to some of the pieces of the music score. Definitely, I would highly recommend this film, as it's just, it's just a perfect, one of those perfect kind of like gangland movies. And it's just kind of like, it's very minimal in terms of dialogue. The fact that they shot this movie without a script, I mean, the director was just telling them, this is what's going to happen in this scene, and this is what you need to do. So pretty much a lot of it was kind of improv, and it just has this really strong feeling to it. And like, it's just kind of like, the flow is really good. It kind of sets off onto like a different kind of like, when other characters are involved or introduced, it just kind of goes off into a slightly different direction, but then kind of goes back onto the main course. And I mean, there's a great scene where, it kind of is like a throwback to the mission, where there's one scene, all they do in the mission is that they're actually kicking about a paper ball whilst they're waiting in an office lobby. And this time around, all it is happening is they're actually kind of like lobbing and like kicking and headering a Red Bull can, and then at the same time it's like that can's in the air and there's a shootout going on throughout the whole scene. And the way they're kind of edited together is just, again, masterful filmmaking. I mean, Johnny To does what Johnny To does. Number 24 is The Terminator, 1984 US movie directed by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Michael Biehn, and Lance Henriksen. Again, yep. A killing machine sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor, who's the mother of the future freedom fighter resistance leader John Connor. And at the same time, Kyle Reese, a soldier from the future, is sent to the past to protect this said woman, Sarah Connor. And what happens is just like a great chase, and just to protect and also kind of preserve the future. Now, this film, it's iconic. I mean, this film single-handedly kind of made Arnold Schwarzenegger's career. I mean, he had like Conan the Barbarian, which was kind of a hit, and but as much of a success that film was, but it was The Terminator which made Arnold Schwarzenegger a huge star. This kind of like just shot him into the stratosphere. This kind of followed with films like Commando, Running Man, Predator, Red Heat, and of course, the inevitable sequels, films like Total Recall. I mean, this was the film that started it for Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, he was not really hitting the level of like box office success that he would have wanted to, but it was The Terminator. Bearing in mind this film only cost about maybe a few million at the time, and it was considered a low budget kind of indie kind of flick, but I don't know, there's just something, the way that James Cameron kind of handled the movie, it looked great for its time. Even if you watch it now, where some of the scenes, especially the scene where you see the Terminator, kind of like the the endoskeleton just walking through the fire, it's iconic as hell. And again, a scene that you probably would never see in one of the movies today, where You see Arnold Schwarzenegger just kind of like ram raid a car into a police station and just kind of like just kill every single police officer there and just kind of just blow shit up. And it's just one of those films that you won't see that. That's something that can only have been done, you'll get away with in the 80s. And definitely. And Michael Biehn did kind of like a good enough job. And you see like how like Sarah Connor, her character played by Linda Hamilton, you see this kind of wholesome person, and at the end of the journey, she's kind of like, she has been through a lot of trauma and a lot of kind of like life-changing circumstances. And you see her kind of turn from this kind of like happy-go-lucky type of like peaceful, life-loving person to all of a sudden a very serious, determined, concerned person who has worries about the future. And definitely, and again, this kind of role, I would say, is perfect for Arnold Schwarzenegger because, as you know, he's made some great movies. He does have screen presence, but in terms of acting abilities, he's not exactly the greatest. I mean, that's never really been a requirement in terms of action stars. You don't have to be like a critically acclaimed, award-winning, and academically lauded kind of like actor, because there's just he has that charm, he has that charisma. But the fact is, this time around, because he wasn't speaking, the Terminator, he didn't really speak much, and he was kind of pretty much playing a machine. He was perfect for the role. I mean, this is kind of like, because he had that kind of big, they had that big kind of like huge kind of presence to him, and he kind of fitted the role, considering that when James Cameron had initially pitched the Terminator, he was looking to kind of like cast Lance Henriksen as the Terminator and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Kyle Reese. But then that kind of changed because Arnold Schwarzenegger thought that it would actually be a lot better if he played the Terminator himself, because of like his build, how huge he is, and you can kind of like create this kind of menacing kind of feel to the character. And both of them did kind of agree. And even one of the scenes where if you'd seen like the conversation between James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger, where they're talking about how they had to kind of film some of the scenes, like for example when he punches through the window in a car and opens it, that was actually all done without a permit. So they had to kind of like literally do it like as and when, like, yeah, this is what you do, just punch your fist through the window. I was like, okay, wow, it kind of just shows the lengths you have to go to kind of like just make a history-changing film. It's again, this is something that kind of like broke new ground. I mean, this is when kind of like, I was at the time where more or less science fiction movies were kind of like hitting a peak. They were kind of like getting to this kind of like ultimate level. I mean, you had great films like, from the 70s, you had great films like the original Star Wars, you had Alien, in the 80s you had Blade Runner, you had Back to the Future, and also in the midst of that, Terminator was one of those films as well. And as well as the other two Star Wars installments. But then the Terminator is one of those films that kind of like literally kind of shot science fiction into the genre into like a completely different kind of stratosphere. I mean, you had like great sci-fi horror like The Thing, but then you had something like this, which was like kind of mixed elements. It was an action movie with science fiction kind of like elements, strong science fiction elements with time travel involved. And at the same time, it was it kind of had this kind of very horror feel to it, like, because you had this unstoppable killing machine. It's like kind of like a horror thriller, like a chase movie. And even some of the car chases in this movie are still good to this standard. I mean, considering they filmed on a very tight kind of almost shoestring budget. Number 23, Eastern Condors, 1987, a Hong Kong movie directed by Sammo Hung, starring Sammo Hung, Yuen Bu, Joyce Goodinzi, and Yuen Wah. Yep, this film starts off in in the 60s or 70s, where it's just after the end of the Vietnam War, and of course the Americans had lost the war, and they left a cache of weapons all in the in the depths of Vietnam. Nobody knows about it, and they don't want, like for example, the Viet Cong, who are in current control of the country, to find these weapons, as it could kind of lead to kind of devastating effects around the region. So what the U.S. military decides to kind of take some Chinese and Vietnamese prisoners, train them up, take them and kind of like assign them as soldiers to kind of go do a suicide mission in the heart of Viet Cong controlled Vietnam, and at the same time they just to win their freedom and also a lot of money. But then things go awry where the mission is cancelled. One of the planes is actually is kind of bombed, and the mission is cancelled, so they're kind of left and stranded on their own. At the same time, they would have to kind of like try and kind of like, well, they're part of like they team up with Cambodian guerrillas, and also a local kind of like hustler named played by Yun Bu, and eventually they kind of end up crossing paths with a maniac, laughing maniac Viet Cong kind of general. But yeah, throughout this film, yeah, it's great. It's kind of like, it was at the height of like where you had like these kind of movies, like for example, First Blood came out, and then you had the second First Blood, and this came out about a couple of years after the second one. And this kind of like was like a Dirty Dozen feel. Hong Kong does a Dirty Dozen type of movie where you got these kind of this band of kind of different characters and personalities who end up kind of going to this suicide mission, and they must kind of like go against the odds. I mean, the plot is very kind of linear, very simple. It doesn't really kind of demand much, but I mean, it's just such a thrill ride. The pacing in this film is so fast, and at the same time you have got a lot of cameos from like very kind of Hong Kong veterans and other stars, and at the same time there was like just amazing fight choreography. I mean, for me, this probably is my favorite Sammo Hung movie that he has done on his own, and it's kind of like, again, his fight choreography was great. I mean, he even lost quite a fair bit of weight for this movie, and just to kind of like so he's able to actually perform some of the stunts himself, like a lot of the main ones himself. But then of course he was actually doubled by other people, including Chin Ka Lok, and even Yun Bu had actually kind of like doubled for some of the other actors in this movie, as he always does in a lot of Hong Kong movies. And again, the fight choreography is just brutal, because it's not like done in a comical way, because even every move that they're kind of doing is just to hurt or kill people. And you see kind of at the time she was the future Mrs. Sammo Hung, Joyce Godenzi, who you kind of see her kind of like just burst onto the screen with this kind of like energy, and her abilities were just great. And kind of like they saw, yep, she's the next big kind of like, probably one of the next big female action stars. Although she had a really short career. And this film initially, when it was kind of pitched to Golden Harvest at the time in the 80s, this was supposed to have been the fifth movie where Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung and Yun Bu all team up together. But what happened was that Jackie Chan had kind of like just about finished wrapping up on Armor of God, and he was taking a rest, and the boss, Raymond Chow himself, was rather kind of like concerned and said to Jackie, I don't want you to go abroad to the Philippines to kind of like to make a move, because you just kind of like narrowly escaped death. And if that was to happen again, who knows? I mean, it could be even worse, because then again, there was a lot of explosions in this movie, and they said that we won't be able to do that. That's why we'll kind of like do Dragons Forever afterwards, when Sammo Hung returns from the Philippines. We'll start working on that. And then at the same time, it was Jackie Chan had actually eventually started kind of working on Project A Part 2, whilst the other two, Sammo Hung and Yun Bu, who were the stars in the original as well, had decided to they were in the Philippines shooting Eastern Condors. I mean, it all worked out at the end. I mean, they did make Dragons Forever afterwards, which I would say is one of my all-time favorite Jackie Chan movies. Yeah, I would say definitely Eastern Condors itself, it kind of holds that space. It's just not just a great kind of modern day martial arts action movie. It's a great action movie overall. I mean, it's got it's just filled with excitement, entertainment, violent, bloody action, and some really, really amazing fight choreography. I mean, this is the type of fight choreography that only can be found in Hong Kong movies of the 1980s. You couldn't find them anywhere else. You can't really, it's just really kind of like virtually impossible to kind of like find anyone else be able to do that. I mean, yeah, you had for example, you had films like Van Damme was making kind of like martial arts movies in America. You had a few of them stars in the US and whatnot making all these kind of movies, but their fight choreography and Sammo Hung and the Hong Kong way of fight choreography, it's just completely different. They had a different kind of feel, different tempo, and it's just a lot more brutal. And you can kind of see, for example, the punches, the way that they perform, and for example, the takes that they do, for some of the long takes, and the intricate movement. It's just, you wouldn't see that in a lot of these, the Hollywood action stars wouldn't be able to pull this off. Not without a double, of course. Number 22, The Good, the Bad, the Weird, a South Korean movie directed by Kim Ji-woon, starring Jung Woo-sung, Lee Byung-hun, and Song Kang-ho. This film itself, again, it's kind of like its namesake. It was adapted and inspired by Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a 1967 masterpiece. This was a 2008 film again, which kind of sees three men, a righteous bounty hunter played by Jung Woo-sung, who's after a thief played by Song Kang-ho, who goes by the name of Yoon Tae-gu, and Park Chan-yi played by Lee Byung-hun, who's a gun for hire. And all three of them eventually, the bad, which is Lee Byung-hun, and Song Kang-ho's character, which is Yoon Tae-gu and Park Chan-yi, they decide to they are after a map, which is aboard a train, which leads to a source of wealth in the Manchurian deserts, which is very much kind of like needed by the Japanese army in order to kind of fund their battle in World War II. And at the same time, you have the righteous bounty hunter played by Jung Woo-sung, who's after Park Chan-yi. And as this whole film kind of unravels, again, it starts off, it's unraveled. You kind of see that a lot of the characters have their own motives, and there's a reason why Park Chan-yi is after Yoon Tae-gu. And this film itself is just such a blast. It's just kind of like, when it comes to like the kind of good old-fashioned action adventure, it's perfect. I mean, this, at the time of its release, it was the most expensive South Korean movie because they had gone notoriously over budget, and you kind of see that, especially in some of the action sequences. Just so large and grandeur. There's so much grand kind of like, set pieces, and again, the way that they were shot. I mean, the action choreography again done by Jung Do-hong, who's a Korean martial arts expert who's also competed as a boxer, and he's a star and a fight choreographer for many Korean movies, and an action director. And it just kind of like, this film, again, it was peppered with great kind of, like the chemistry between the characters is really good. There's a lot of humor in this movie. It's kind of like, it's very kind of madcap at the same time. This was Kim Ji-woon's, this was his follow-up to his 2008 2004 movie, which was A Bittersweet Life, which is like kind of like a Korean gangster movie. I mean, absolutely amazing film. But this itself, yeah, again, it was a good movie. Not, I mean, but then. He had also kind of like had this kind of like really kind of like madcap comedy kind of feel, especially with Song Kang-ho's character. He's a great, one of the greats of like South Korean cinema. I mean, brilliant in movies like A Taxi Driver, Parasite, The Host, and I would say definitely this movie and Memories of Murder, again another South Korean movie I would highly recommend. But there was in this movie, he kind of has this kind of crazy kind of feel to it, and his character just is kind of. He's crazy, but at the same time, he's kind of someone like who's got a bit of a sinister background, and it kind of reminds me a lot of like, for example, because Kim Ji-woon, it kind of has that feel, like the action and also the comedy has a feel of like, for example, the movie The Last Stand, which was directed by Kim Ji-woon as well, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Johnny Knoxville. But Johnny Knoxville's character kind of very gave off a lot of vibes of Song Kang-ho's character from The Good, the Bad, the Weird. And again, I mean, the way that it kind of even kind of like pays homage to The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, being the the final standoff between the three characters, and it's one of the chase sequences are absolutely amazing. It's just like kind of like just filled with like so many extras on horses and like cars. You have kind of like assassins kind of jumping from like vehicle to vehicle and whatnot, and it's one of the great kind of it's just kind of filled with kind of just great kind of action that you don't get to see that often these days. And at the same time, I mean, one of the great action sequences was a shootout within a kind of like a back market, within kind of like a closed black market area where one of the main shots, or my favorite shots of the film, was when Jung Woo-sung is actually kind of like on a rope, and he's kind of just kind of gliding around, flying around, holding a rope whilst he's shooting, and you kind of see him, the way the camera kind of follows him, it just looks absolutely incredible. And even when you watch it now on Blu-ray or even on DVD, how it just looks absolutely fantastic. Number 21 finally is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, a 1984 film, US directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Harrison Ford, Kate Capshaw, Ki Hui Kwan, and Amrish Puri. Yep, this time we see Indiana Jones. This is set like a couple of years before Raiders of the Lost Ark, so it's kind of like a prequel, but this is a sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Dr. Jones, with his plucky young psychic Short Round, played by Jonathan Ke Huy Quan, and Kate Capshaw's glamour girl, end up in India in a village, and they see that it's actually left with famine and just misery. And they find out that the children are actually being held as slaves by an evil cult, which is controlled by a man named Balaram, played by Bollywood legend Amrish Puri, the late villain who started so many movies. I mean, yeah, and then it is up to Dr. Jones to stop this man. I mean, yeah, this again, a very iconic action movie, a very kind of great adventure story. Again, this is what kind of like made Steven Spielberg for me Steven Spielberg. I mean, that's why his films have that distinct quality. Although you can kind of see that the Harrison Ford and Kate Capshaw's kind of interaction in the movie is very kind of like has a lot of hostility towards it, because bearing in mind this was the film that was made during the time when George Lucas, the producer of the film, was going through a very bitter divorce from his ex-wife, and it kind of made this kind of apparent in the writing of this film, which was kind of had this really kind of like, made this really kind of horrid character who kind of whines all the time. I mean, Kate Capshaw did a great job, but then, you can see that Harrison Ford's kind of like just getting irritated by this woman all the time. And I mean, Amrish Puri, again, he does a great job as a as the antagonist of the movie, and you kind of see the reasons why he's doing all this, and it kind of raises questions upon like whether was colonialism right, or well, should we accept the fact that colonialism caused a lot of problems in the in the rule of India, and at the same time, I mean, there are some kind of like some questionably like maybe things that you might not be able to get away with. The fact that you see these kind of like Indian men just eating like snakes whilst they're still alive and stuff, like what the hell is all that about? And you got like things like voodoo dolls and God knows what. It's like, there are some kind of questionable kind of like stereotypes that were kind of presented in this movie, but at the same time, it's just a great action movie. It's just, again, I mean, Harrison Ford had that charm, and again, John Williams' amazing music score is just kind of really awesome. I mean, it would have been great to see whether they could have actually filmed a chase along the Great Wall of China, which was originally planned for the opening sequence, instead of a kind of like a shootout at a club and then this chase through a car chase and such through the streets of Shanghai. But it all seems to work. I mean, for me, I would always have to say, I mean, the first 3 Indiana Jones films for me have always been the greatest out of the 2. It's like, you can't really, you can't fault them. I mean, the 4th one, very questionable, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. But then this one, definitely. It was just like, it's an absolute kind of like, this is one of the fun ones. Going to be announcing the result of the giveaway. There's only been 2 entries. This is from like my one of my previous videos. I'm just going to be announcing the winner. I gave a bit of time, so yeah. I mean, I will be doing another giveaway, which will be when I've got up to 500 subscribers. I will be doing another giveaway where could be anything. Okay, right. I'm just going to pick it up now. And this time, the winner is unflipping believable. It's Video Tasties. Congratulations. Yeah, I think I've still got your address. Yeah, I'm gonna have to send you a bundle of goodies, which will be sent out shortly. And yeah, I mean, again, see, and you can even check on his channel. He did get my. He did get the video, and then I'm sure, yeah, I think I did send something off to Rick at Old AF Reviews as well. Again, great channel, check them out. And yeah, he had actually kind of like, yeah, exactly. So if you do kind of end up winning something, no, if you do kind of like participate, you do have a chance to win. So, once I get to 500 now, that's it. This is the last giveaway up until I get to 500. So I just need another 200 people just to get to the next one. And the next one's going to be at 1,000 after that. So, it will be a mixture of different things. So I would recommend you kind of like just spread the word, get people to subscribe, and just push my videos out there. Well, yep, this was my top 50 action movies from 25 to 21. Of course, now we're getting into the top 20, so it's kind of exciting, and I look forward to sharing my my thoughts and my videos with you, my opinions, definitely. Remember, check me out on Instagram as well. Peace out.